I don't think I could ever expect anyone to operate if I'm not willing to put the hard work in, not just hard work, but just operating at a high level of performance. How can you ever expect it? I think there's a lot of power in just setting that expectation, letting the world know this is who I am. Meritocracy is a real thing in my life, wholeheartedly. And I think what will happen is you don't know until you walk the path. It's like anything in life. So you can look as much as you want, but you have to walk, you have to climb the Kokoda Trail, or you have to do something. When you actually get to the tail end of it, you kind of go, okay.
In the consulting world, reputation isn't just important, it's everything. But how do you build that reputation in today's digital age? In this episode of Building Doors, we sit down with Harley, director at Minerva Group, whose journey from the military to engineering and then into business development offers invaluable insights for anyone who's ever transitioned sectors or grown business. Over the past 2 years, Harley has transferred his LinkedIn presence from a modest 300 connections to nearly 10,000, with weekly impressions soaring to over 12,000. He's seen a direct impact on this social proof in the relationships he's built and the doors that have opened with new business. In this episode, you'll learn how to build an online brand, why it's important, the power of leverage, first-time leadership lessons, and insights into authenticity online and why it matters. Let's get stuck into it. So welcome to the Building Doors podcast. We're going to get stuck into it straight away.
I'd like to say I had a whole bunch of notes prepared, but I do not. Yeah.
I prefer no notes.
We'll give it a bit of a crack. Oh, I'm a very organised person, you see. So
I know.
It's actually quite challenging to wing it completely, but we'll give it a crack.
In a while, you will just forget that everything's around, that you're recorded, and you'll just relax and just all being having a conversation. Look, thank you so much for coming on as a guest. I've seen your journey, obviously, on LinkedIn, and you've always been really authentic in sharing your story. I thought it'd be really powerful for us to sit down today and talk about your journey. I know you've transitioned from the military into the career you're in today, which is fascinating. But I also know what an effort it is to, build a brand, an online presence, be authentic, and be able to shape who you are online to connect with your clients and customers, while also building a business, doing the BD, hitting the pavement. I think that this conversation is going to be like, what is it actually like to build a consultancy? And it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Oh, I think credit's where's credit's due. You kind of look from the outside as an employee.
Yeah.
And, I was very much the case, having left the military, moving into consultancy world, looking kind of from an employee's lens, and I went, well, it can't be that hard, like surely, they just reap all these benefits, and you see them at grinding away at the office, but they're always out at lunches, they're always out doing something, having a great time. What you start to appreciate when you go down that journey is it's all the time that you don't see, and that was definitely a massive kind of realization of the challenges that you actually face.
Yeah.
But you don't know until you walk the path. It's like anything in life. So you can look as much as you want, but you have to walk, you have to climb the Kokoda Trail, or you have to do something. And when you actually get to the tail end of it, you kind of go, okay, I get it. It's like climbing Mount Everest or something. Not that I will ever do that. I'm definitely a tropical climate, land animal that not designed to climb up that kind of thing. But I think, again, you have to walk the path. And when you start to realize, wow, okay, there's so many things just on top of, delivering a really high quality product, a service-based product. There's so much more to it than just that. Yeah. What meets the eye.
Yeah. So. Talk us through. I'd love to learn your journey and why you ended up being in the role you're in. Where did it kind of start for you?
Wow. Well, all the way back in the army.
Yep.
To be honest, I was actually playing rugby, so this has nothing to do with fire engineering, obviously, but my journey is anything but a straight line. I started off playing rugby for the Defence Force and Army, quite late starting that, but I did. And the reality was I had a really great opportunity, I had a really great coach. Matt Cobain was actually my coach at the time down at Melbourne Uni, who used to speak Wallaby. And he said, well, you should play more rugby and consider, if you want to take it more seriously, or you can't just be in the army. And at that time, I was pretty set on a career in a totally different pathway within the military. And so I hung up the boots, so to speak, to put on new boots. I discharged from the military and pursued rugby, like any New Zealander would. Because we've been thrown the opportunity to play rugby union, especially with, although as a Wallaby and being a supporter of All Blacks, that was a whole different thing. But that was the driving force actually behind leaving the military. But I went, well, what am I going to do? I can't just do that, because if it doesn't pan out, and I'd met plenty of people actually in the army who had careers, professional careers in rugby, but that didn't pan out, and they actually joined the army, and I went, oh, I've learned from them. I need to have a backup plan. And fortunately, I did, because I spent a whole of 5 minutes and decided to do engineering. And so taking you along this journey, I left the military, walked at the university 2 weeks later. So I had gone from being a bombardier, which is for most people equivalent of corporal, just below sergeant, had my own I was a forward observer back in the army. Basically went from directing indirect fire support and artillery and fast air to walking into a classroom with 18-year-olds.
Wow.
And so I won't even tell you half the stories of me being very, very rigid, going for uni, but I basically juggled uni and...
Come on, you have to tell me one of the stories. How were you rigid?
Oh, I don't know. I might get a little bit of hate from this. Actually, to be honest, Elliot Reeves, our director from New South Wales, actually, I talked to him about this story and he published it online, so most people know about it. Okay. But group assignments were very interesting because I had a very high bar of expectation. I'd also taught on courses and instructed before. And so I had this expectation that this is the deadlines, everyone will deliver a high quality product, this is when it's due, we'll vet it and then we'll deliver it. And so I got a very rude awakening to 18-year-olds. And look, I was 18 months, so I can say that like everyone else. But they just weren't that interested and they produced subpar work. And someone actually sent me a Wikipedia extract and just said, that's his work.
Oh, no.
And so in true military fashion, I deleted his name off the report. I said, good luck finding a new report, new group, and then submitted our work. And that didn't go down well with the university, who were like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be inclusive. You're supposed to have everyone on the team involved. And I said, well, you can't, it's not my job to teach. It's your job to teach. I said, I've instructed on courses and the expectation was if I had not adequately instructed as a instructor, I'd be reprimanded for it as an instructor. Because that was my experience being in the military. The pressure on instructors in the military is very high. And the expectation is that if someone's not doing well, that's on you as an instructor, not the other way around. So I had a misalignment between what was a higher education, supposedly higher education, versus what my experience was. And so that's just one of many, many stories during uni. So I don't want to share them all. But long story short, I did civil structural engineering, just wanted to work in Brisbane. I realized that applying for graduate programs was impossible. So I cold called a whole bunch of companies. And before long, I got the call back. How does fire engineering sound? And they appointed me to the job, and full credit to them. I knew nothing about fire engineering and I had to learn the hard way. So and then here we are today, which is, now we're coming up to 10 and a half years later.
How many cold calls did you have to do?
A lot. To be honest, in the beginning when I applied for jobs out of uni, it was quite a shock. The only people that called me back would look at my CV and they said, oh, you played for Australian universities. And I went, what has this got to do with engineering? I don't understand. I got straight HDs, that should matter. But everyone that called me was because of my rugby. And then the cold calls, there was many cold calls. But I figured that was better than applying for graduate programs. No offense to the big guys out there, but it's a laborious, labor-intensive process.
Oh, it's full on. And I, as someone who's run graduate programs for the big guys out there, I know exactly what you're talking about because there's a lot of obstacles to get through because there's a criteria like you've got to try and meet as well.
Yeah, and you get culled if you don't meet certain criteria, and I get that. They have to bring the talent pool down to what is their desirable kind of outcome because you can't vet everyone to determine who's the best person for the role. But for me, I just thought that if it could be Googled, it wasn't worth it. This was my approach to trying to find a position. And so I went the old school way. I opened up it was online though, white pages. Okay, if anyone remembers the old yellow pages.
I remember the yellow pages.
it was basically an online version of that. And I just went from engineering consultancy to engineering consultancy. And picked up the phone, did a little online contact us and worked out.
Okay, so because I want some of the graduates to hear this, right? Because I know some of them listen to the podcast. We've got all levels. How how do you handle the rejection piece as well? Because, I find sometimes grads can be a bit sensitive when they're looking for a job. They really want to get stuck into it.
Oh, look, I had a very good friend going through university, and, kind of dragged him into studies and all that kind of stuff. And he had a very, very hard time finding a position out of uni. And he thought, I've done really well. I think he might have finished first or second in mechanical engineering.
Wow.
I just had such a hard time. And I kind of said to him, look, all you've got at the moment is a ticket to the ride. Like everyone else, there's another 1,000 people that have turned up the ticket. Now it's whoever gets the front of the queue kind of thing, or looks the best in that queue will get led into the ride. And said, I know that it feels hard because you've spent 4 years flogging yourself and even more if you've done a master's. But the reality is that a lot of other people have done that as well. So it's not just enough to have finished a degree. Back when I was trying to look for a job, it wasn't enough. I had to do something extra, or I had to be able to demonstrate some level of alternative skill set. Now, unfortunately for me, everyone will say, oh, Harley, you had ex-army and you had all this kind of criteria in CV. And I did. So I was 28 when I started engineering, which is quite late when most people start when they're 22, for example. So for me, it was still, I think I was already hardened by life a little bit by the time I was probably 28, having went through the military and endured some very challenging situations, both overseas on operations, but also back in country. I think rejection was just part of my normality that, I kind of expected to have to throw mud against the wall for 1,000 times until it stuck. I kind of had that intrinsically as part of me. That was my expectation. Whereas I feel like, unfortunately for graduates, they may not have had that experience in life already. And so for them, perceptionally, like a lot of struggle and stress is perceptional, apart from like overwork. But I think, if you're a graduate, your perception is, I've finished this, I've done really well, jobs should be there. But unfortunately, the harsh reality of the world is that's not the truth. The truth is, you might have to work very, very hard to get that. You might have to be very humble and accept, a position that you didn't want in order to get where you want to be. Some of the jobs that I was offered when I got out of uni was after, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications. One was in Dubbo, and I was like, I'll take it. I said, nothing, no offense to anyone in Dubbo, by the way. But not my first pick. Not number one. Number one was Brisbane, and I was willing to take that because I went, that is necessary.
Dubbo.
You dummy in. But that was for me. It was like, okay, I need to do that for a year.
Yeah.
I need to do that for a year, maybe 2 years, and just learn as much as I can, soak in, read everything, ask hundreds of questions, and then become more useful so that I could then demonstrate the usefulness to where I wanted to go. But I guess for me, that I kind of expected that. But then again, the army sends you anywhere they want for every 2 years.
Yeah.
They shove you around the place, and that was normal to be, I might have to relocate. For me, that was a given that I might have to do that.
Yeah.
But I feel like when you're also a graduate, it's hard because you're like, my family, my friends, everyone's here. I get offered a job in Roma or something like that. Again, no offense. But very far west, I could see why that wouldn't be appealing. But for me, it was just, I might have to do that, and that's just the way it is. And I accept that that's only 1 or 2 years of my life.
Yeah.
And then I can then start going in on the positions or the companies that I really want to be part of. I was just lucky.
You have to be willing to, I was actually talking about this at a conference yesterday about construction. You have to be willing sometimes to take a couple of steps, to the left or to the right or to where you want to be to get to where you want to go long term. You have to be okay with taking what's available as well. And I think that's going to be a bit of a rude awakening for some people over the next 12 months because work is going to kick off shortly in some areas, but there is potentially going to be a lull. So I think people are going to need to challenge themselves and they're thinking a little bit, engineers particularly, about where they'll work, particularly as all the work is going to be regional. Like that's another thing that we're seeing, come up in the pipeline. One of the things I find interesting is that, so defence and the army background and then also sport. One of the things we always used to look at it for grads, if they'd done sport, team sport, it was always a massive tick. And that army background, I know when I worked at John Holland, we had programs to bring people through, ELF 2B and different types of Amberley and
help them transfer.
Helps them transition.
That is hard to transition. And we could have a whole podcast about just the transition and challenges associated with it because especially if someone's quite young. If they're 23, 24, and I know some people are like, oh, and that's not young. I'm like, it is pretty young.
It's young to me.
Yeah,
so I'm going to call that young.
Perceptually, very young to me. But I say that because that was who I was.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly challenging because you might be in command of, like myself, it was indirect fire support. I was coordinating artillery strikes. I was in charge of lives, my team, my unit of people. Whether I was detachment commander in control of, multi-millions of dollars of equipment and artillery gun of 6 soldiers that are responsible for their life inside and outside of artillery. And then you walk out to the civilian world and you're a 23-year-old. People look at you like you're a kid. You go, well, I've been overseas on these operations. I've done all these things. I've been in command of lives. But perceptually, the whole world sees you as this 23-year-old, very young and expected to be naive. And there's a massive gap because you've actually aged comparatively the civilian world, unfortunately, very, very fast. Because you've had to grow up very, very fast. You haven't had that gradual growth in terms of in maturity. It was like now you're in the deep end. You have to adjust and overcome that. So it's great to hear, like, when you're involved in that they had those programs because they're so important. I didn't have anything like that. I just turned up to uni and they made a whole bunch of people upset.
Well, it's funny. I was talking to a guy actually that was a project director only a couple of weeks ago. One of the things he found really challenging was like he was super structured and then coming into what we call the civilian world and being super structured and then trying to adapt to a completely different way. Did you have that? Laughing suggests potentially. Did you have that adaptation struggle?
I kicked someone off a project, like my first project, right? Because they weren't structured. Absolutely, I challenge with that. And look, even now, there's little jokes. Our community in fire engineering is very small. It's incredibly small. I remember going to Ulster University over in Ireland, and there was like 5 people I knew. That's how small it is. So we all talk, irrespective of kind of business, especially when you make these friendships. And they always joke and, say, Harley, you're rigid, blah, blah, blah. I've heard this. And I'm like, I've never actually talked to you before. Who did you hear this from? And it's like, oh, no, you're very structured is what everyone tells me. And I'm like, oh, man, can't get that's a long time ago. Was it 15 years ago or something like that? But it still floats around and follows me. And the reality is I still am. I'm still very, even this podcast today, I had travel time, organized my calendar before and after.
You were early as well, yeah.
I was early because if you're in the army, if you're 5 minutes early, you're late. So there's all these kind of habits that, even though it's 15 years ago, are still very much ingrained as part of me. And I don't think that ever fully goes away. And it's a good thing that it doesn't, because you actually do, there's a lot of skills there that you don't naturally pick up. The army drills into you. And there's a lot of great things about that as well. But in saying that, yes, it can be very hard when people turn up late and you're like, well, what's going on? And, particularly for meetings and all that kind of stuff. But I've relaxed over the years. It's only taken a decade and a half, and I'm starting to relax a little bit. But yes, very challenging.
So how did those skills, so you're now in a fire engineering consultancy in your leadership role, you're growing business. How have those skills, helped in some respect in your transition into that type of role?
So if we talk about structuring in isolation, a big one is obviously resource planning and coordination of resources to make sure that when you're telling a client something that, we're going to deliver on this date, that it's a real thing. It's very easy to fall into a trap of everything's 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but that's not necessarily always the case. So when you have a very structured week planned or 2 weeks planned, or an estimation of what that 3rd and 4th week may even look like in terms of even at least business development, maybe internal business meetings coupled with delivery, you can very quickly, in the space of 10 seconds, skim over your calendar and go, I can get it to you by this date. Might even be 2 days earlier, but we'll commit to this date so that you can book based on that. So that's quite powerful when you're passing that knowledge on, a skill set onto your team as well. Mm-hmm. I don't want everyone to be super rigid or super structured like me, but they should be able to say, week 1, we've got X, Y, and Z, engineer using algebra. Week 2, this, and this. We can fit in this. I've got this many hours available to be able to squeeze that in. That's very, very powerful in terms of not just internally managing workload so that okay, everyone is a bit overloaded, or okay, there's actually space here. So being structured also enables your team to know, well, how much availability do you have as a leader as well? They can. My calendar is completely, nothing's private. I just go, look, you see everything.
Yeah.
They can click on my calendar and they'll immediately know that they have an assault of different colors, by the way, because everything has a different color. But they can very quickly go, okay, I know what he's doing. There's an opportunity here to get some time with him. There's opportunity here because it's real, because I stick to it. So does that answer your question?
It does. I think that transparency with having my calendar's open to my team as well. I think it also gives them a window into how much you're managing too. When they can see your calendar, and if they can't book in straight away and they have to book it a day or two later, they're like, oh, wow, actually there's quite a fair bit. Because in roles I've had before, I'd never had access to my manager's calendar, but I'm the same.
It's all just busy or private, the whole thing. And you're like,
I'm an open book too. And I find it really interesting because then they start to see, oh, hang on, there's a lot of other stuff that's involved in the day outside of, doing the actual work. There is the BD, there is the business planning, there is all the other stuff, that is in there that they can see, in that transparency works.
I think it's quite powerful. And fortunately, Luke's been with us for now over a year. He's a great mind. He will see stuff like that and he will just say, look, I know you're flat out. I know you got a lot of these things on. It's really key that we talk about this so that we can still deliver on schedule. And I go, and that's awesome. I tell you what, I can shift this to create space to enable us to do that. So he'll always kind of look at the calendar and have a bit of a think where if we've got too much compressed in a few days, but he needs advice to be able to do something, he'll help me create that space because he can see fully transparently where I'm at.
Yeah.
But that's like I've always been a very transparent person. I don't think I can hide emotions, which is a terrible thing sometimes.
No poker face?
No, zero. So, it comes with the pros and cons. The pros is that it enables people to be very, very, very honest with you, and it's a two-way honesty discussion, which is the way I like to always be.
Yeah.
But it also enables you to, have that trust as well. And then they could look at you and also say, well, Has got a lot on. Okay, he's doing as best he can to support us because we always talk about. I think we talked about previously trying to juggle a lot of different commitments at the same time. I think it enables them to be able to once again see what we're doing, but also kind of simplifies to some extent as well, which I think is important. Whereas if it's just blocked out and they see you come back and you've just had a great lunch somewhere nice, it's all, they might perceive something that's not actually a true representation of what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, one of the things I definitely want to talk about, and I think it leans into it nicely when we're talking about being transparent and authentic, one of the things we've spoken about, which has been interesting, is building a brand on LinkedIn. So I was only talking to people yesterday and some of them were saying, or one guy I've known for years, he's like, I might be open in the market, but I'm not on LinkedIn, or I don't use it too much. And my advice is always to them, if you don't, then you won't be found. Or secondly, if you want clients to know a bit more about you, it's a great window. So tell me about, where did the idea stem for you to go, well, maybe I need to start putting a little bit more out there in terms of content?
Jeez. I know what had happened is when I started opening up the consultancy firm, I very quickly realized how little connections I had, because as an employee, particularly if you're not in a business development position, who cares? Just get on with doing fire engineering, which is what I actually really enjoy. I'll crack on with doing really great fire engineering and honing that skill and managing the team. And I was largely in charge of operations for a lot of engineers, and so I just doubled down on getting really great at that. But then when I was like, okay, well, I've got this great opportunity to bring Minerva to Queensland, the director of New South Wales. We just got along. We're just two peas in a pod. We're polar opposites also, but he's just a really great human. And so when I had that opportunity, I then quickly realized I need to go out and really spend more time, learning about project managers, learning about developers, learning about contractors, the struggles they go through to try and go through tender processes, the things that there's so much missing knowledge. And I have no problem saying that, because I kind of walked into there thinking I knew one thing. And then, 6 months in, I realized how deficient I was in that knowledge. I like to think I was a great engineer. I like to think that I'm always learning and becoming a great engineer, but I was horribly deficient in that knowledge. And so, I looked at LinkedIn and went, there's 300 people I know. I have connections with, which enables me to contact them and talk to them about things. And I went, we're in the 2023 at that time. We're going towards 2025. And I just went, well, how do I get in contact with more people? How do I be able to go beyond my normal reach. You know, the normal reach being, you know, I can reach out to a client that I used to know or whatever, right? Another thing I also had, which was a harsh realization, is I had, you know, a restraint period. Mm-hmm. So you've got a restraint period. I know Labor's doing their own thing, but I won't go to that. But I also, you know, had a restraint period at that time. And I went, well, I can't contact any of these clients that I know. And the organization I work for had a very wide breadth of clients. They've been in Brisbane for 18 years at the time, 20 years now. And so I had to go cold. Well, that's very hard. So the initial driver was, I need to just connect with people because I need to go and talk to them about helping them on projects. Ultimately, that was it. And for me, that was a logical mechanism to pursue LinkedIn in order to be able to connect with those people. And that was an incredibly humbling experience.
How did you? Well, you probably don't have what I've got. I've got the word recruitment in my title, so sometimes I have the and then I hear everything that every bad recruiter's ever done in the world. But my question to you is, how did you find when you went out to? When you say humbling, tell me more about what that was actually like going cold. Because let's be real about it. A lot of people are under restraint of trade, and I don't think they think about what that's going to be like. It's hard, you know. I think as a society, we've been bombarded to death with hard sell. Hard sell. Man, I tell you what, when someone puts a hard sell in my inbox, even though I'm trying to be empathetic because I went through the process, but I never hard sold. No. And when I get a hard sell in it, oh my God, I'm so fast to delete that. Like, it's just like lightning speed. Yeah. It's like, hi, by the way, here's our product. Boom, in your face. Honestly, like. And you've just added them half the time. You've just added them. Like, you don't know them.
Yeah. And then, but the best part is you'll get it 4 times back to back.
What when they go, I'm just wondering if you've seen my message. I'm like, yeah, no, I saw it. You're trying to sell to me and I've met you like never.
Yeah, so you don't buy from people you don't trust. No. So, you know, because of that social, you know, how we've been bombarded as a society with ads constantly trying to hard sell you, it was quite hard in order to actually reach out and just go, hey, look, just want to have a coffee and I want to learn more about you. I want to actually understand how you tick, you know, what your pressures are, you know, from a development perspective, you know, what's the thing that always goes wrong for you? And then maybe I can demonstrate some value to you in your life. And so the humbling part was when you first start out and you think, you know, well, no one knows me. I'm just this guy. I need to go out and try and meet some people. You know, you send 50 messages and you'd be lucky if 5, maybe 3 message back. And so like there's times when I didn't, you know, the movies would be on the background. They were just noise because I'd be messaging, you know, 50 people a night, just going, I hope I can talk to 3 people next week kind of thing, or the week after. So that was the cold face.
50 a night.
I don't know. It was ridiculous.
That's massive. No, but that's you're right. It is massive.
Well, you know, and I didn't want to do that. I'd love to be able to say, talk and just go, let's go have a coffee, let's go catch up. But I had no one knew who I was. They didn't know. They didn't care. Like realistically, because they've been bombarded with so much. I completely understood this because I was exactly the same. And that was the humbling part. What I can say though, as part of that journey of starting off with 300 people that I had connections with, who I could start to dialogue with, that as time went by, I slowly added more and more people. And you know, some people accept, some people ignore you, some people never check LinkedIn, and I just slowly worked my way up every week for the last two years straight, basically. So every week I would log on and spend more and more time. And in the beginning, I'd start off helping the brand, like I was helping writing content for our business, LinkedIn. I think that's how it starts. You start writing something for your business LinkedIn. But the reality is people connect with people. They don't connect with businesses. Yep. And so the content that I was writing for the business LinkedIn was very much trying to teach people things that were valuable, questions that I got asked all the time. So I started off with things like, hey, if you're in Queensland, it's different to New South Wales. And here's the challenges in what we do as fire engineers to do a fire brigade. Start off with these like basic things. And often it was really helpful because people would contact me and go, Harley, what do you think of this? And I'll say, just read these slideshows. They'll tell you all about it. And that should become a really good resource. And I started to see the power of that in terms of when you get asked the same question, I could just send someone a slideshow from LinkedIn and they'd go, oh, great. So that was quite powerful. And then I slowly started to build on that over time. And so I started to build out like a sports stadium how to design them kind of serious, and that received positive feedback. And so the more positive feedback you get, it's kind of, oh, wow, okay, I'm starting to, people are enjoying this. It drives you to want to do it. And so, yeah, that's kind of where the humbleness came from in the beginning, at least anyway.
What worked? Okay, I need to know this as well. Did you have a little formula that worked? Because even with myself, like when I'm doing it, I never know what outreach is going to work and what's going to land, depending, because people are so different. But I'm curious, did you have like a formula that worked?
Oh, I mean, I'm an engineer, but I didn't write a formula or a template. But what I always kind of believed in is if you're not going to be willing to make an effort to understand someone, if you're not willing to read their LinkedIn and understand their history, if you're not willing to do any of that stuff, then no one's ever going to respond to you. So at the beginning, you start off going, I don't know what I'm doing. So you just like go, hey, how you doing? Let's have a coffee. Hey. And you
Someone will have coffee with me.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take anyone. But eventually you realize that that's just a terrible, terrible way to do it, because if it's generic, you've made no effort for that person. You need to make effort before you expect. You have to give before you can receive. That's the fundamentals, right? And so, I started not doing the 50 a night, right? Like, because that was like, I was like, typical engineer, percentage of conversion will be this, so I need to message this many people. Ridiculous, right? But that's an engineer's mind. Yeah. Just absolutely ridiculous.
Structure. You're like, okay, I do 50 a day. I know that the average formula for how many convert is this. So surely if I do 50 a day, it will result.
It was awful. It was awful. And then I figured, well, actually, how would I like to be contacted? And that changed the script completely. And that started to be, well, I'd like to be contacted by someone that says, hi, Harley, it's thank you for the connection, first of all. I noticed that you worked here. I could see that you've worked on these projects. I actually worked at this firm on that same project. Or I, worked with so-and-so who I understand you work with at the moment. They've heard, this is what I've learned about you, would you have, 30 minutes one morning, next month, not even anytime soon, that we could catch up? I'd like to learn more about you, your business, who you are, all that kind of stuff, And that's genuine, because I do want to know who they are, what their business is, what their aspirations are, what their goals are, where they want to end up, what markets they're going after, and can I help you? And I'm not talking about fire engineering. Fire engineering is wonderful. That's what I hope. I hope that we'll get some work so that I can continue to have a great team and build them. But how can I help you? Can I help you by helping you meet this other great person in the same space that you're operating? Can I help you do this? And then I just believe in reciprocity. That was kind of when I looked inwards, I went, well, that's how I would like to be contacted. And so I changed the entire approach from just spamming people to death, which was just terrible. Oh my gosh, I wish I could take it back. But you have to throw stuff against the wall to see what sticks, and nothing stuck. So I changed that entire approach. And look, it takes a lot more effort. But I think us as humans in a society that's bombarded with so much messaging, the only thing that cuts through is effort. And you can't fake effort. If someone sends me a ChatGPT thing, I can spot it a mile away. I'm like, use that giant hyphen thing. I know it's ChatGPT. Or, it said navigating. I'm like, you're cooked. No one uses that word except for ChatGPT. So like, at the moment.
My son says cooked. You're cooked.
Yeah. You can tell straight away. I mean, in the future, no. But at the moment, you can. But what cuts through is, as that person actually put effort in to understand me as a person, and if they have, the likelihood of that person then responding to you is much higher, and rightly so, because you've actually sacrificed your time to understand them. So all too often, you see the old school sales methodology is always numbers, short, sharp, try to get to the outcome as fast as possible. I think the world has changed drastically, and it's actually, don't care who you are, don't care how far up the chain or down the chain you are. Have you sacrificed actual time and effort to interact with me? And if you have, then people are so much more reciprocative of having that discussion. Again, a lot more effort, but logically, a lot more effort gets a better outcome.
Yep.
So, as opposed to copy and paste.
I always end I was actually saying this to my son this morning about basketball because he was complaining about where he's at with his team and he's working so hard. And I just said, I always say to him, I say, hard work will beat talent when talent doesn't work hard. So it's great that you're good, but you got to keep working hard at it. And I think as well with the landscape of business development, sales, whatever you want to call it, has changed because we're so, we're more skeptical now because there's all these different tools that will I don't know, like, when you get those in-mails and then someone follows up on an in-mail or an email that you didn't ask for. Like nothing is more annoying than that approach. But it is very rare. I still don't get many, like if anyone's ever selling to me, it's very rare for me to get a personalized message. Very rare.
Yeah, it's incredibly rare. And I think it matters. You have to be different is the reality. If everyone's doing something, then we go a completely different way. And otherwise, you just in the mishmash of spam emails. We all get them. We all get the spam emails, and then you're like, download pictures? No thanks. Like we all get that stuff, and you just get blended up in this mishmash of automated emails. The thing is, what's quite fascinating is when you look at from your own perspective, and you think, how fast can you spot an automated email? How fast can you spot a text or a message that's automated?
Yep.
You can do it almost instantly, which is crazy when you think about it. But our minds have become so adept at knowing when something's automated because we don't like it.
No.
So because we've come like that, if you're doing that, well, then you can only expect the same results that would happen if someone sent you that. So that's been my realization. And the thing's shifted, which we were talking about, that's the humbling part of it. But as the journey's gone on, things have got better. And I guess that's what we're probably the next part, which is, how did I go from being very horribly humbled with, a very meager amount of connections to something that's growing quite well?
Yeah. So that's the question I'm going to ask you as well. So it's going well right now. What did you find started to work? Because I find people, when they start using LinkedIn, you're trying stuff, right? You're experimenting,
Yeah, you make heaps of mistakes.
Some things land and some things don't. You're like, oh, probably shouldn't have posted
this
that.
is a killer post. And then you're like, two people look at it. And you're like, I spent so much time.
Everyone's going to love this. There's so much data. There's so much facts.
Yeah, exactly.
What did you find? So what did you learn over time, when you start to look at and it's the impressions that they say that you look at, not the likes. So it's the impressions and the amount of people that are reading it. So I hear. But what did you learn over that period after you started to gain traction? What did you learn worked and how did you keep consistent?
I mean, it's an interesting space out there because it depends what your driver is behind it. I think that's the big thing. And I said that to a number of business leaders or business owners that ask me about it at various different events. And they go, oh, what's the ROI? What's the return on investment? I say, oh, you can't. It's hard to quantify. And I always used to give the example of, how much when people did TV advertisements, what did they expect as a return on that? Was that not just the reach of letting people know who you were, or that you're here to help, or that wherever it's a charity organization there to promote getting donations in order to help people, or a helpline trying to help people, or, a very corporate giant just trying to sell stuff. The reality was that it was an ability to reach people on a meaningful level. So what did I find that stuck and didn't stick? Geez, it's a real interesting experience because even now I'll think that something's a really good post and it's going to provide a lot of value, and then it will just hit a brick wall and fall off. But then other posts I wrote one about, building code definitions and how you can't find engineer them. It blew up and it just went to tens of thousands of people. And then there was comments on it left, right, and center, some from New Zealand, some from overseas and even in Europe. So to be honest, it's very hard to gauge that because what happens is your connections and then your I guess followers or your group of people changes and evolves with time. So I've for me personally, it was taking a bit of a diversified approach. It started off with sharing a little bit about me, and that was also a bit of a self journey because I never share anything about me for most of my life, to be honest. Very insular person. And so that was quite hard to share a little bit of that. But what I found from at least doing something about me as part of some of the more technical posts that I do was that people found there was some level of connection there, whether that was, hey, Harley, how's your pumpkins going? Or like, hey, Harley, how's your dragon fruit? I just saw you down. I was like, it's awesome. Do you want one? I even had an architect who was like, I love passion fruit. And I was like, I turned up to his office with a bag of passion fruit off my vine, you know?
I love
And I just
passion
said, here you go, you know? Like I gave him some passion fruit. I wasn't looking for anything there. I just went, I've got so many coming out of my eyeballs. And he said, oh, like I really like them. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll bring some to you. And I was just swinging by his office one day and I went, here's your bag of passion fruit. Off I go, you know? So I think it helps break down some human connection. And those posts are quite powerful because, you know, we're emotional beings ultimately. Like whether we try and be completely unemotional or objective, the reality is we gravitate to people that we connect with. And so, yeah, look, things that worked well, I felt that if it was a pain point that people experience, and I gave them some explanation of how to navigate a pain point, I found that stuck really well, particularly like project managers or a builder, you know, this is what always happens. Here's how you can get around it kind of thing. Those are quite good. Sometimes it's really technical discussions and it's with fire engineers and we all just battle it out. That's not me trying to sell anything to a client, but it helps our industry have those kind of debates as well. So again, it depends how you measure success. If you're measuring just client engagement, well, that's one thing. But then are you also contributing to a community as well? Or does that make sense?
It does, because it's a broader impact, right? Because you're giving value. You know, you spoke before about giving value before you meet someone. That is giving value. When you post on LinkedIn, you're giving value to many people. So it's one to many. How can you give value to the people that read your posts? What are they going to walk away? Maybe they'll get a bag of passion fruit if they're lucky.
Never know.
Or maybe they'll learn something about building code or fire engineering on that they're stuck with on a project that's helpful to them. Maybe they will learn and grow their skill set in their area that they're studying because they build a community of other people commenting about around the same areas of interest as well. So
yeah, I think that was my goal wasn't to go out and just be. I think it started off with I need to meet people in order to grow a consultancy. Like I'm not going to say that I was completely philanthropic. You know, I was like, I have to be reality about this, right? I went out because I needed to talk to people. I needed to have coffees with them. I needed to be able to, in order to deliver a great product. But that was where it started. But it's definitely evolved since then. It's been, okay, you know, I want to do something for our community as well. Yes, it gets to showcase some knowledge that I have and provide value to our community. But what it also does is it enables other junior engineers to see that as well. So I connect with a lot of other engineering firms and we'll discuss stuff between other directors of other different engineering firms, all the way down to Tasmania, to New Zealand, even to Europe. And we'll discuss complex topics. But the benefit is not necessarily always for those people. You know, people debating usually have a very high level of knowledge. What's really powerful about that is all the junior engineers reading that debate and they say, oh, wow, this is the confliction of opinions and this is where they ended up. I think that's really, really powerful. That's something that you can do and I'm quite passionate about. So they started off in one place, but then I created that. And then out of that, I had the opportunity just recently to help with some practice note stuff for Engineers Australia. So a really weird opportunity came out of nowhere and they said, well, would you like to contribute? And I went, sure, that'd be great. So, and then from demonstrating some technical expertise in certain areas, for example, I talked about testing of fire materials, quite esoterical, quite bespoke stuff. And then I had a manufacturer of tensile membrane structures reach out and catch up, and he wanted some advice on this, and there might be opportunities to go to a conference to present. So weird and wonderful kind of opportunities to contribute to community or to your community or contribute to wider knowledge of how to navigate buildings. Those kind of things are wonderful. But then what usually happens as a byproduct of that is that opportunities might come that actually align with your business. So it's a long way to go.
it's the long game.
It's a long game. I say that to anyone, if your sole goal is to turn around, you know, bids and leads and all this stuff, LinkedIn's a 2 to 3 year game. And you have to do it for the right reasons for 2 to 3 years. You can't just sit there and go, my goal is to get as much work in the door to make as much money. If that's your driver, that's no one's got to do that for 2 years if that's your driver. The driver needs to be, along the journey, you need to find other reasons to do it.
What role does AI, where can AI play a part and shouldn't play a part? Because this is a really tricky thing we're talking about right now. We know AI, we want to improve productivity in the industry. The productivity gap is 30% overall. We talk about average days on site of productivity is 2.4 at the moment, they say. My thought process around AI is, so in the BD component, in the business component, thinking forward, what role do you think AI does play in that business acquisition, in how you run your business now? Because we've got to be careful, right? Like we've talked about, you said it before, like people can see a AI post. So where do we use it?
Good question. I mean, this is a loaded question because no matter which way I go, there's going to be a differing of opinion, right? Look, personally, I think this is my personal opinion. Obviously, everyone has their own on AI. We love AI. We use it all the time. It's incredibly powerful. But I still believe that connections from people to people need to be genuine. They need to be from you as a person to that person. And I don't think AI can bridge that gap yet. Who knows what happens in 10 years' time, right? Like imagine life before the internet, which is, we know what it's like. So the world has changed and it's going to continue to change. But I think at this present time, nothing will ever be the same as shaking someone's hand.
Yep.
Nothing will ever be the same as talking about your daughter to them and their daughter and then laughing about the ridiculous things they've done on the weekend. I don't think nothing changes the fact that trust is generated between two people of common interest that can both contribute to each other's success, whether that be in life or in business or whatever it happens to be. So that's the way I feel about that. In terms of business, AI is awesome. It can do so many things. We use it all the time for checking documents, for inaccuracies and all these other things. I think the sky's the limit in that space.
Yep.
And we're not even trying, we use it every day. AI is open on my computer all day, every day. But the trick with that is making sure that the engineers don't become dependent on it, that they use it as a tool, not in order to make up for a lack of their own knowledge. I think that's the biggest thing. Because ultimately, I still think that regardless where AI gets to, at least in the short term, at the end of the day, a person has to sign off. And at the end of the day, it's your registration or your capability or your chartership that's on the line. So you still have to, it's not going to completely replace that from my perspective. In the future, who knows? Could be iRobots going around and doing our job. But for now, I feel like it's very powerful. We use it a lot, but it still has some limitations.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I still believe this. I was saying this the other day to my team. People will still do business with people they like as well, because it's just human nature. If we're connecting with people and we enjoy working with them or partnering with them on a project or a piece of work, you just kind of going to want to go back to the people that you know and that you trust.
I think exactly that's the trust piece, but I think it also comes down to when you like someone, they like you, you're willing to go further for that person. And irrespective of whether they're on the right or you're on the right, if you have that relationship, something goes south and it's their fault, chances are they will go further to fix it and you will accept it more. And so those relationships continue to go on, because when there's deviations both ways, there's give. You don't have that relationship. It's like a contract. Black and white says this, you didn't do this, now we have a conflict. But when you build those trust-based relationships, there's room for it to shift back and forwards.
That's so true. Because you'll go the extra mile for them and they will for you, because you've got a collaborative relationship right from the start.
Yeah, and then on the 3 projects that went sideways out of the 100, you both sat in the trenches together and you made it through. And they know that when something doesn't go that way, the way that they saw it, that you're going to have their back to get to the end. And that's something that you can't just put a price on and go, this person's 5% more and this person's 2% less and this person's 15. They go, well, if it's all much to muchness, we'll go with that person and their company, because we know that when the going gets tough, they're going to be here to support us if it does go tough.
Yeah.
We hope it doesn't, but at least we have that level of expectation between both parties.
One of the things we spoke about before, which I want to talk about before, was building a high performance culture. So, having a culture of excellence as the expectation has its challenges, right? Because if you've got high standards, we were talking about this before, if you've got high standards, then you therefore have that high standard that you expect for your team, and you have a high standard of delivery that you then use as your differentiator with clients. Tell me about how you have learnt to build a culture of high performance.
Wow, that's interesting. I think, if we take it all the way back to the army days, I was never the fittest, strongest, all that kind of stuff, but I did believe in some very fundamentals of leadership. And everyone's got the different versions of leadership and all the rest. But for me personally, I always believed that, even as a bombardier, and I had my own detachment of soldiers back when I was in the artillery guns, I'll always be the first one to grab the shovel when it got hard, or do this or that in order to make sure, like I said, if I'm running faster than you, there's something wrong, for example, so I think for me personally, if you want a high performing team, then they have to see the quality that you're the example of what, and if they see that example continuously, unwaveringly at that level of performance, then it's only then fair for you to be able to say to them, lift to be. And I would never expect someone to operate identically. And I've had many of these discussions. I've been pulled up plenty of times saying, Harley, you can't expect people to be, and I said, well, completely understand. But what I want is people to lift to their greatest capability. And that greatest capability might be 60%, but they might be 40% better at other things, or 70% and 30% and whatever. Everyone's got their own skill set. But in order to do that, well, you need to be operating at a level that you're setting the standard at for yourself. You can't ever, I don't think I could ever expect anyone to operate, if I'm not willing to put the hard work in, and not just hard work, but just operating at a high level of performance, how can you ever expect that from anyone else? And so that's always been my guiding light through every single team that I've ever managed, whether it be rugby, playing a rugby team, or whether it be in the army, or whether it be subsequent to an engineering career. That's always been my guiding star, I guess. And it's always done me true. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff that falls out of that, obviously, around measurement. If you don't measure it, it doesn't happen, and all these things. But I think ultimately, if we had to succinctly put it, is that would be how I usually you attract like for like. So if you are that type of person, generally the people that will not want that will run for the hills. So I'll share a uni story. We didn't want to share two of them, but if we go back to uni for a second, after that interaction, after that report where someone got cut off it, unfortunately, I know it was very brutal back then. After that interaction, what happened is that as time went on, people started to know what I was like. Very structured. I wanted everyone to pull their weight. I would check everyone's work. I'd expect them to check my work. We'd produce excellent quality reports, and we get HDs. And that was it. It was just, that's what I expect. And if you want to work with me, that's what I expect. What actually happened, interestingly, is I didn't have to go out to find a team. People gravitated towards that. And there's a brilliant, oh my God, such a brilliant human, Yanni Boris. He's, I believe he's a associate professor or something along those lines. He's on that pathway to become a professor at Victoria University down in Melbourne. Brilliant human. And him and I gravitated together. And I always felt inadequate with him because he was just so smart. But then we started to see other people that gravitate towards us as well that all had the same mentality. And so what we actually ended up having was this really solid team through university, and actually made it so much easier because you didn't have to, everyone just knew that the expectation from each other was that we did very well. And that was, almost didn't even have to say it, but it just happened. So I think there's a lot of power in just setting that expectation, letting the world know, and LinkedIn's a great mechanism for that, letting the world know this is who I am. Meritocracy is a real thing in my life. I believe in it wholeheartely. And I think what will happen is we'll gravitate the right people to us. Maybe that's whimsical, and all the business leaders are like, what are you talking about? There's not enough people and you can't do that, but so far so good.
Yep.
So far, we had a couple of engineers or 3 engineers join that are just, I'm very humbled to be able to lead them, to be honest.
Yep.
So
it's awesome. I do believe it too. I mean, I think it's one of the things in the universe that we cannot explain. There are certain things that we know to be true, and one of that is like attracts like. And if you do put out there what you wanting to seek goals wise, I've always been a big believer you'll achieve it. If you're really dogmatic around where you want to get to, and how you're going to get there, and you put that out there, that you will attract that as long as you're willing to overcome the obstacles too.
Yeah, plenty of obstacles.
Plenty. And so I always ask this question, and I think it's a really interesting one. Looking over your life and the work that you're doing, if you were to look back, what do you think the legacy is that you want to leave for your life's work?
That's pretty good. I think for mine, look, I could say a whole bunch of wonderful things like, man, I worked on all these amazing buildings and helped shape them. And that would be the commercial answer. The commercial answer would be, we worked on these amazing stadiums and it was brilliant and name up and highlights with Minerva across the horizon, you know. Don't get me wrong, love that, want to do that, but I don't wake up in the morning for that. Now, in saying that, and that's very, like, Elliot's going to kill me from New South Wales for saying that, but Elliot is that. Elliot freaking, that's what he lives in. Like, he wakes up in the morning, just wants to make the most amazing buildings. They walk around and just point at every building in Sydney and say, this one's this and this, because he loves it. I really, really thoroughly enjoy fire engineering, and I want to do these great developments, leave a legacy for my family, absolutely. But the legacy that rings most true to me as a person is leaving behind, you know, so much knowledge with the people that I get the opportunity to be part of their learning journey. That's actually where I get my joy from. So I get a lot of my joy from seeing, you know, one of our more junior engineers, he's a year in now at Minerva, Luke, like where he started to where he is now, like such a reward when we'll sit down and we'll say, think about, let's look back, you know, and that for me, that's the legacy. Is I'd love to be able to step away in the future and have just a whole bunch of engineers that I've had a part in the journey. One, like a little part for some, major parts for others. For me, that's truly, truly rewarding. Don't get me wrong, want to work on super cool buildings, but like that, for me, that's me.
Yeah. I feel like there's always that answer that you think you should give, and then there's the answer that's
why I call it the commercial answer.
Yeah, the commercial answer. What will our clients want to see? Well, what I want to do.
What I should say is Minerva's printed on every Olympics building in 2032. Like, you know,
yeah.
And that would be wonderful too. And we obviously are aiming towards doing that. But you know, you ask a question about me as a person and my legacy, then that's definitely.
So now we have the rocket rounds. The rocket rounds are a bit of fun. So it's just a few quick questions.
Here we go.
You have not prepared for this, have you? I can tell.
No, I haven't prepared for anything, obviously. So.
The first question is coffee or wine?
Coffee or wine?
Wine.
Oh, coffee.
Coffee. Okay. And cats or dogs?
Dogs.
No one ever says cats. I don't know why. I need to change that question. I've had like 3 people say cats. And favorite holiday destination?
Japan.
Okay. And what podcast do you listen to?
Oh, this one.
That was awesome.
Or Diary of a CEO.
And
that's a very common answer, right? Like,
yeah,
it's got to be a generic answer.
It's a good one. It's great. Okay. And one of my favorite questions to always ask is, what makes you feel like you're home?
That's a good one. I think if it's got to be cold in an hoodie on the couch, I think, snuggled in. Like that's
hoodie
probably,
and cold.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I grew up predominantly in Melbourne. So New Zealand first, obviously that's where I was born, but came over to Melbourne and like there was always a feeling of around, because we had an open fireplace and it was kind of, you know, I can't simulate that in Brisbane. So that's why there's a hoodie. But if I had to go back to the roots, it would be sitting by an open fireplace, occasionally have to like grab embers off like the mat in the front and try and like stop it from spitting out, you know, like.
Don't burn the house down.
You know, the old school open fireplaces where like the ember would shoot out and you were like, quickly put it out. That's probably my home memory, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for coming as a guest. It was so much fun. And I think I really appreciate your honesty in sharing it, because there are people that have spoken to me that do want to start their own business or have thought of having a consultancy or do want to step up into, you know, a principal level or a leadership role. And I think
and the reality is, you know, principal levels, there's an expectation around building the network for the business. And, you know, with that obviously comes certain remuneration, but at the same time, that's a very daunting thing if you're very technically minded, trying to make that bridging gap. I guess I'll leave on the thoughts that, you know, LinkedIn is just one of the many ways, but it's but it's very powerful if you commit effort and you do it in a way that you genuinely make an effort for people. If that's what you do, then I think you'll start to see positive results. If you're doing it solely hardcore, commercial gain, hard sell, well, we all know what that feels like to receive. And, all you have to do is look at your own LinkedIn inbox to see how many people we've ignored that have tried that approach.
Yeah, yeah. How many people do you reckon will listen to this episode and send you an automated email? Go, hi, Harley.
I won't know because I won't open it.
Thank you so much.
Right,
Look, love having you as a guest. As always, so you can follow Harley on LinkedIn and then see some of his posts. There's lots of fruit and also fruit and fire. And then also please follow the business as well on LinkedIn. Like, share, subscribe, rate, review. And also, I do hear a lot of guests do reach out. So a lot of people do reach out personally to the guests. Please keep doing that because the guests will often message me and they love nothing more than hearing that an engineer or a leader got something out of the episode. So,
and I am happy to talk about it as well, my journey. That I've touched on a very small part of all the hardships that went along the line of trying LinkedIn out and with zero idea what I was doing. And hopefully there's some value there. And hopefully I can share some of those experiences, or if you run into something that isn't working for you, I might have already done that 3 times. Did not work. And then I might be able to share some thoughts around, well, okay, maybe it's because of this or that, and give some insight into that as well.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
If this episode gave you new insights, don't let them go to waste. Take action. Apply them. And if you want more insider strategies from the best in construction and infrastructure, make sure to subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the leaders who open the most doors aren't waiting for opportunities, they're building them.